Hey, good morning everyone, and welcome to the PivotBoss Pre-Market Report. I'm Frank Ochoa, aka PivotBoss, with analysis for June 6th, 2016. Here's a look at the ES in a daily time frame. The first thing I want to mention here is that the weekly pivot range is very narrow here. Those three lines, very narrow pivot range, and that's to be expected after the previous week in which we had a holiday shortened week and pretty much just a sideways trade throughout the entire week. And whenever that happens, obviously you have coiled up action that leads to a narrow pivot range. That gives you an indication that there could be some sort of expansion event or some sort of increased volatility this week. Given the fact that we're kind of holding at highs up here and we're trading near the upper portion of the range, I would expect us to at least test the outer limits of the range, perhaps on both sides of the range early this week. We'll see. But obviously the early idea is what's going to happen if prices push beyond 2105, 2106, 2107. What happens in that case? Because there has been no indication here over the last couple of years that price can see acceptance above those levels, and every time we get beyond those zones we see an immediate rotation back to value. So what I'm going to be looking for early on is any signs. If there are any signs that price cannot see acceptance above 2106, 2107, that could be a quick idea for a swing opportunity back to value, 2061 or perhaps 2049. Obviously, we have our D-shaped profile that's been building out here, very nice balanced profile. And up here in this portion of the profile, it's very thin. Rejection has been seen. And typically speaking, if there cannot be any acceptance, you'd likely rotate this back to value. That's not to say that we can't break out and rally here, but again, I'm more skeptical at this point, and I have to let the market prove that it can continue higher. If the market can find acceptance beyond 2106, 2110, then we do have upside targets to play to, and you can see that the 100% of average target for the last 10 weeks rather, would be 2139.75. So based off of the pre-market low, we could see a move as high as 2140 and still be average. So that's important to note. Obviously, we also have 2145 half. That's going to be a 25% of key range target from this edge here. So that's going to be important as well. So we do have some upside targets to play to. However, it's just you have to see how the market's going to react above these zones where there's been no acceptance and total rejection so far. So we have to just kind of watch the edges. Nothing really solid to go on right now. I would say if price cannot hold above the 2094s, then that could be an early indication that we're rotating back down. Let's take a look at the intraday time frame. On an intraday basis here, you can see prices pushing up toward the highs here of the recent session. I think this is going to be important to see, again, how does price play out here. We had a push above the 2100s right now, 2102s. This is going to be important. 2103.75 is the previous month's high. Watch that zone very closely. I think, again, if price cannot push beyond that zone and starts to hold, that could be an easy play back to 5-day value, 2094. And again, remember, 2094's failure to hold that level would indicate more weakness to the downside. All right, let's take a look at crude oil. Here's crude in a daily time frame. Very much the same deal here. We have a very narrow pivot range to begin the week. There it is. And this is 2 weeks running, 3 weeks running, really. And you can kind of see that's been reflected in the charts. We have a very narrow range that's built out ever since price pushed above that LVN 47.22, above the previous month's high here, 47.46. That's been an important level. And what I've mentioned before was as long as price can remain above this zone, we had a shot to continue higher into 51s being the next LVN on the other side of the hump, 51.65, and then perhaps as high as 55, which is the major HVN above. So that's what I'm going to be looking for. How does price respond above this LVN? If price can continue to hold this zone, then I think there's a nice continuation toward 55s ahead, but we have to let the market prove it right now, and we haven't really seen any continuation so far. So if all of these participants right here who have been attempting to get this thing long, if they don't get paid, the stops are going to be below this LVN here. So a failure to hold above 47.22 could easily rotate this all the way back down to the previous month's low at 43.71. So right now we have the key levels set. We just have to see how the market responds to these levels. And right now, very narrow, tight range. Anytime you have a tight range like that, there could be an expectation to test both sides of that range before resolution occurs. So something to keep in mind. Taking a look at the intraday time frame for crude, you can see just recently we had a nice rally that sparked off, and we're starting to push higher already. The market has mostly chopped around the overnight pivot here and is now pushing through 49.30 and is continuing higher. Leaving behind a series of ledges here, so that could already be an indication of a trend day setting up. Anytime you start to see an aggressive push and you start to leave behind LVNs in the wake of that move, that's usually an indication of a trend day type of setup. So pullbacks to LVNs could be very important to defend as this thing continues trending higher. Right now, we have a primary upside target on the day at 49.64, which we've already reached based off of the overnight low here. The 100% target still ahead at 49.95, and if a full-on trend day materializes, then the 125% expansion target could be in full view at 50.26. So those are the next upside targets to play to during this trend day. We also have a 25% weekly expansion target here, which is going to be very important as well, and that's going to be at around the 50.70. So we have some upside targets. Again, if this is a full-on trend day that starts to materialize, you want to look to defend LVNs on pullbacks for a continuation higher. All right, let's take a look at gold futures. Here's gold in a daily time frame. One thing we talked about when we had this rejection day here, we thought it was a pretty good, clean observation that we'd likely see after that rejection a move back to value. And then what happened after that was price went cleanly offered through value, came back and rejected at it, and then got a slingshot move in the 1208s. We talked about 1208.30 being a very important level and that the bulls would want to defend it. After this rejection day here, you can see plainly it was defended off of 1208s, and then we saw another push back above 1236 half. So anytime you see a stops run like this one here, it could spark the next leg all the way across the range back into 1275 or 1286 in that zone. But when you push through the 1236s here, you want to come back and defend off that level. So bulls are going to be looking to be active at defending 1236 and even as low as 1228 on this pullback here. It could be a nice buy opportunity for the next move back into the 1270s. Failure to hold 1228 could put more pressure on 1208s. And again, there's a lot of stops that are starting to build below 1208s. We've had a lot of rotation here. So if there's any failure to hold 1208s, that could be a big time move across the previous range here into 1141s. So right now, the early idea would be to defend pullbacks into this zone, first shot at squeezing higher. Now, we have to see what the early week low would be in order to give us a better primary weekly target on the upside. But right now, we have 1274 as the primary weekly bull target. But again, if this thing pulls back, this will also pull back like this, and then that would find your target. So we're probably looking at around 1260s as the primary upside target for the week. Let's take a look at the NQ. The NQ, a very, very narrow pivot range for the week as well. You can see it's been mostly tightly coiled, kind of an expanding range that's been forming here. Again, anytime you have a narrow range like that, there could be a tendency to test both sides before resolution occurs. Obviously, given the current up move here, what I mentioned before was once you got through the top of this price distribution, the expectation would be to go to the top of the recent distribution here. That's 45.50 to 45.60. So I still believe there's more upside here to be seen, at which point we could see a rejection back down and perhaps form a distribution in this range. So again, we have to see how the market's going to respond to prices above these highs here. If price comes into these highs and cannot find any acceptance, we could be rotating right back down across the range. Looking at the intraday time frame for the NQ, overall we've seen a nice little push higher here. I think given the current up move that we've seen, we could be looking at a 45.40 target. That's the primary upside target for the day. And then you have 45.52 as the secondary. So those would be the upside targets to play to if price can establish acceptance above the previous session's high of 45.23. Failure to do that could open up a rotation right back across the range into recent support, back toward 44.85. All right, that's it for now. Let's see how this thing plays out heading into the new week of trading. Good luck, trade well, and happy Monday.